Hello everybody, I'm Alyssa from Meditative Astrology, and today we're going to talk about the astrology of August 31st through September 6th. We have a few things to talk about today. Before we get into all of that, I want to give you a reminder and invitation to like, follow, subscribe on all of the platforms. If you haven't already subscribed here on YouTube, go ahead and hit that subscribe button so that way you don't miss any of the weekly videos or the live meditations that we have Sunday nights, 8:30 p.m. Eastern Time, streamed right here to YouTube, as well as to Facebook. Follow us on Facebook and on Instagram so that way you don't miss any of the weekly intentions that we have that come out on Friday or any other updates that we have. All of those type of things are all posted to the social media pages. So to make sure you don't miss anything, Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and as always, meditativeastrology.com is the hub for all of the things. So thank you for allowing me to say all of that here first, right off the bat. Let's go ahead and get right into the astrology of this week. We're going to start out on Sunday, August 31st. The moon in the sign of Sagittarius and no major aspects. So we're going to go ahead and we're just going to bop forward to Monday, September 1st. This is where the action starts. Moon in Sagittarius before moving into the sign of Capricorn, but we also have Saturn moving back into the sign of Pisces. So Saturn has been retrograde and now it's going to retrograde right from Aries right back into the sign of Pisces. It will go direct the end of November and it won't move back into the sign of Aries until February 14th. So from now until the middle of February, we have Saturn in the sign of Pisces, a place where we had it for a couple years. So now we're going to be revisiting that energy. This is coming through just in time for the eclipse that's going to happen next Sunday on September 7th. We'll be talking about that in next week's video. And it brings a weighty focus back to that Pisces house and the topics of that house within your chart. So take a look at your birth chart, look at what house Pisces falls within. I recommend using the whole sign house system, but whatever division system that you use is just fine, and see what house topics are there. If you're not quite sure, then we can do that through a reading as well. So yeah, bringing a focus back into that Pisces house where Saturn earlier this year moved into the sign of Aries. It moved forward into a sign of action, the sign of fire, a sign of motivation, drive, initiation. Aries is the place where things start and initiate. It's the place of Mars. It's the first sign of the zodiac. It goes out on its own. It's very, very solo, very pioneering, very like blazing new trail type energy. So that's where we have been. So maybe with Saturn moving into the sign of with Saturn having been in the sign of Aries for a little while, maybe you've had structural, foundational things that feel really solid, that have had some momentum moving to them. So maybe things that are moving kind of quick but feel like they have some substance to them, feel like they are going places, right? So like thinking of like, you know, like a bowling ball. Like it's hard to maybe get it to move to get it to start to move, but once it gets its momentum, it keeps rolling, kind of like that. Now we are given this moment to step back and to assess, because now we've moved, Saturn has moved away from that place of motivating drive, initiating, that Aries place of just go, go, go. Now it's stepped back into the sign of Pisces. Things are much slower, maybe a little bit, I was going to say calmer, but that might not be quite the word in the sign of Pisces. Much more reflective. So step back and assess. See what foundations, see what has been initiated, what frameworks and what foundations have been laid down for you through the spring and the summer here. You know, what maybe has moved a little faster than you anticipated. Maybe with the sign of Aries, since we don't always think before we act, maybe now taking this time to step back into the sign of Pisces where we can be much more reflective. We can take more in, we can kind of assess what has been going on, and we can evaluate what has been going on here from a reflective standpoint rather than a reactive standpoint. Then we will be better prepared to, or, you know, not better prepared, but like more prepared or whatever, to move back into the sign of Aries and to keep moving forward with that Saturn and Aries work that has been going on in our own lives. You know, Pisces, it can be more dependent, it can be more supportive, where Aries can be more independent or more directive, more straight to the point. So in the sign of Pisces, a water sign, the place of Jupiter and Cancer, Jupiter and Venus, I think of support. I think of holding. I think of making space. In Aries, I think of directing the action. You're going to do this. I'm going to do that. All right, break. Let's go. Kind of like that. Much more straight to the point. So now we can step back a moment before we get back to that, like, let's get down to business, Saturn energy here. So opportunities to revisit that Pisces place within your life. And, you know, the eclipses are here. For the solar eclipse, Saturn is going to be opposite the sun, and the solar eclipse we had in Pisces earlier in this year, Saturn was sitting with the sun. So these eclipses that we have, especially with Saturn moving right back into the sign of Pisces right before the lunar eclipse that we have coming up in the sign of Pisces, it feels like this is going to be very foundational and very there's going to be frameworks laid down for a lot of people here, depending on where this falls within your own chart through this process. So take that moment to slow down. Take that moment to slow down, take a breath, and kind of assess what has been going on within your own life and where the movement has been moving a little quicker than you thought it might be. The ability to feel into situations, slow down, evaluate, assess the emotional connections. Have we been too bonded to something? Have we been not bonded enough? You know, like, are we just acting because we're acting, or is there a tie to it? Is there an emotional connection with there? What ties have been developing in your own life? Obstacles. Talked about Pisces moving slower, maybe less drive, less motivation. Pisces brings a lot of energy in. It can be a very psychic and energetic sponge. It just brings everything in. So it can be very overwhelmed with emotions. It can feel happiness, sadness, joy, and melancholy all at the same time. There can be very romantic ideals. So maybe, you know, we're like so happy we could cry type of energy, or like it's so sad it makes me happy, like that type of thing, right? Like those counteractive emotions can show up there. So we could see a little bit more of that for some of us here. Again, co-present for the eclipses, so it ups the intensity of the eclipses here. Foundations, frameworks, especially if it's in angular houses or you have personal placements within these signs, things may really be shifting for you through these movements with Saturn, and it might be a weighty focus that you just can't quite turn your eyes away from there. So that's Monday, Saturn moving back into the sign of Pisces. If we go ahead and move forward into Tuesday, September 2nd, we have Mercury moving into the sign of Virgo. So we have some shifts coming up here this week. Mercury in the sign of Virgo is moving back into its home sign, moving into the place where we're going to have the Mercury cazimi that's going to show up here. We'll talk about that when that happens. Mercury in Virgo can be very meticulous, very careful, very precise, very detail-oriented. There's ability to get work done, and there's lots of moving parts, and there's ability to coordinate different energies here, right? So Virgo is that place that lies between the light half of the year and the dark half of the year. Virgo comes through the zodiacal wheel at the time of the solar story where the sun has been at its strongest, it's been at its peak. The sign right before Virgo is Leo, which is the place of the sun, right? So the sun has been dominant, the sun has been strong, and it has been zodiacal summer. However, the zodiacal fall, symbolically, whether you live in the northern or the southern hemisphere, it does not matter. Virgo lies between that place between light and dark. So the light half of the year takes us from Aries to Libra. Once we get to Libra, which is the sign after Virgo, we now have the dark half of the year where there is more dark than light within the day, within the solar story, within the story of the sun, from birth to death, right? So there is this in-between place of Virgo that knows and is in the light and knows the good, knows the joy, knows the abundance, but also knows that that dark is coming, and you don't know necessarily what stands in the dark. In the dark, there could be predators, there could be things that could harm us. We don't know, so we better be prepared for the things that are in the dark, right? So you get this organization, you get this precision, you get this detail-orientedness that comes in here. You get this particularness with the sign of Virgo. Mercury there ups it. Not only is Mercury ruled by Virgo, but Mercury represents our mind, our thoughts, communications. So no wonder the sign of Mercury in the sign of Virgo, or just Virgo in the sign of general, can have a lot going on up here, right? There can be, and it can be a little bit overwhelming. So the opportunity to get organized, the opportunity to write down your plans and to be able to carry them out. I'm thinking writing them out from Mercury, the psychopomp. You know, transcribing and writing down plans and putting it into something physical. Virgo is an earth sign. And being able to carry them out. Considering what is working for you and what is not working for you. Again, up here in the mental sphere, thinking, considering things. What serves you well? The things that don't serve us well are not going to probably help us in the dark half of the year. They're not going to help us when we go from the daylight to the nighttime, right? Things that are working, we will keep them. We will organize them. We will compartmentalize them. But things that are not working, we are going to disperse them and we are going to let them go. It's a mutable sign, right? So there can be shifting, there can be changing. So considering those things. And with Virgo lying between the light and the dark half of the year, and Mercury being that psychopomp that moves between realms, moves between light and dark, moves between life and death, moves between the material world and the spiritual world here, being able to be in that mental space. Here's an invitation perhaps from Mercury in the sign of Virgo to consider the light and consider the dark at the same time here. And be able to communicate that. Be able to communicate those light things that are in our head as well as maybe those dark things. Being able to being able to communicate our fears and our anxieties and things that could be showing up here for us. The ability to survey the details and be able to sort them out here. Mercury in the sign of Virgo is a very good editor. It's very good at looking at what can stay, what can go, and being able to pitch what we don't need anymore here. Obstacles, nitpicking, anxiety, hyperfixation, even if it comes out of good intentions, this comes from that we need to prepare, we need to be ready. The dark is coming here. Like, you know, your harvest, that like the garden that you grew through the summertime, is your harvest going to be enough to get you through the winter until you can get to next year? Like, these are serious questions that we have in the sign of Virgo. You can see where the anxieties could come from. You can see where that nitpicking and the hyperfixations can come out of what feels like necessity here, right? So there can definitely be some anxieties here, and there could also be some big shiftings coming through here. And I definitely see that with the aspect that Mercury makes on Wednesday. If we go ahead and move through here, we have Mercury making a square to Uranus on Wednesday, September 3rd. Moon's in the sign of Capricorn, making a couple aspects there. But the big thing that we're going to talk about is Mercury squaring Uranus here. If I go ahead and put the chart up, you will be able to see that. All right, so I got the chart up here for Wednesday, and we have we have Mercury in the sign of Virgo in the third house in this chart. So if you find that number 3 in the center wheel there, you'll see Mercury at 1 degree. And then if you look in the 12th house in this chart, you'll see Uranus at 1 degree of Gemini. So this is the square between Mercury and Gemini here. Gonna go ahead and point out that both Gemini and Virgo are Mercury's signs. So there is a little bit of reception here between Uranus and Mercury, with Uranus being in Mercury's sign. So there's a little bit of extra communication, or maybe not communication, but a little extra understanding here at the same time. So when I was thinking about this aspect and meditating on this aspect, the first thing that kind of came to mind was the messenger meeting the organizer, right? So talk about the organizer being the sign of Virgo here. So Mercury and Virgo, compartmentalizing, organizing, all the stuff that we just talked about. The messenger comes through in many ways here. The messenger comes through Mercury in general, the psychopomp, right? The guider of souls, the messenger god. The one that brings messages from the spirit world back into the physical world, and from this, guides us from the physical world back into the spiritual world when it's time for us for our energy to move on from this life, all those type of things. Gemini is information, communications. It's an air sign. And it's Mercury's air sign. So there's a lot of communications and a lot of messages, a lot of information and downloads that come through the sign of Gemini. Uranus can be looked at as a messenger as well. If we consider the myth of Prometheus, which is often correlated with the planet Uranus, we have the god who stole the fire from the gods and brought it down to mankind. brought the fire to mankind through knowledge, information, technology, downloads, insights, enlightenment, all of those aha moments, right? That's a message of kind. That's a message coming from the gods to Earth, to humankind, to humanity, right? So we have messenger all over this transit, and we have the organizer with Mercury in the sign of Virgo. Mercury in Virgo is the ultimate organizer. Maybe I can think of a better one. I don't know, through the different zodiacal combinations, but I think it's definitely up there on one of the highest ones that we have here. So in the spaces where light gives way to dark, we already talked about Virgo being at that place where through the zodiacal wheel and through the solar year, through the lifespan of the sun, the light has been dominant, and now it's going to hand that over to the darkness, right? So Virgo facilitates that handover from the light half of the year to the dark half of the year. The handover that Gemini facilitates is moving from a place where light has been growing and light has been increasing and moving into dominance. So that happens from Aries to 0 Cancer. Once we get to 0 Cancer, we get to that summer solstice. The sun is at its highest peak. It's at its highest maximum energy here, right? But then just as quickly as it meets its height, just like the full moon, it slowly just starts to wane and it starts to lose its energy. Or starts to lose its potency and its light, not necessarily its energy. So the sign of Gemini facilitates the handover from light increasing to light decreasing. Virgo facilitates the handover from light being dominant to dark being dominant. So there's this interplay between light and dark. There's dualities, there's mutability, there's shifts in these signs that are contrasting and bringing in lots of different information. Uranus is contrasting and brings in lots of different information and lots of different changes. So in the sign of Gemini, I'm thinking like, give me information, let that go. Give me more information. Maybe we're letting information go out of boredom, out of curiosity, or out of another thing. In the sign of Virgo, one of the phrases that kind of came to me was, give me chaos and I'll give you form. So I'm thinking of Virgo being the sign that is looking over the edge of the cliff, looking from where the sun is shining behind it, so bright and luminous, but looking over the cliff into darkness, or like looking into a cave. Maybe that's a better than looking over a cliff. Maybe that's a better example there. I like that, cave. So looking into the chaos, but I'll give you form that will allow you to get through it. I'll give you the raincoat. I'll give you the flashlight. I'll give you the tools and the resources. I'll give you the breadcrumbs so that way you can find your way back out of the dark, or whatever it is that you may possibly need, kind of like that, right? So yeah, contrasting information and different things, different shifting things coming all at one time. You know, Uranus brings change and brings shifts. So there's real possibility for shifts and changes of all kinds here. Both planets, both Uranus and Mercury, move quick. They shift quickly. They like to move things kind of quickly. So things could be sudden and they could be quick and swift moving that we don't even really realize it. Shifts of information, communication, tools, resources, our ability to organize, you know, or even just the awareness of the necessity of these shifts, because it's a square, right? So there's tension. It might not always be the easiest to make the thing happen. So tensions, maybe there's a difficult conversation that needs to happen, but maybe that difficult conversation can liberate us from some sort of constraining ideas or processes or thoughts or limiting beliefs of some kind. And we're able to really shift our perspective and see two sides, see the light and the dark, or we're able to move back and forth fluidly between the light and the dark. So that way we don't get stuck in either one, right? There's work, there's tension, it's a square, right? But there could be something good that comes out of it too when we put the work in for it. Opportunities to speak up for what has been unspoken for. New ideas, thought patterns incoming, even if they spark out of difficult moments. So thinking of like speaking up for the unspoken, I'm thinking of that interplay between light and dark. Like light does not necessarily mean good and dark doesn't necessarily mean bad, right? But we tend to stick in the light and not necessarily teeter in the dark. That's not the case for everybody, but for a lot of people, like generally, I think that's a pretty fair statement to to make. So, you know, the ability to reach into those areas that we don't necessarily reach into when we're speaking. Having the courage and the bravery through Uranus to be able to speak of those things. And, you know, not be afraid to acknowledge both the light and the dark is a very real possibility here. Liberation and letting go from something. Of course, if you have to be liberated from something, that means that there's something that you want to be away from. There's something that you want to let go of. So that's kind of like there has to be a difficult thing to be able to have the good thing of being liberated, right? Mental release, maybe a mental struggle to release, but a mental release of some kind, even if it comes from a difficult conversation of some kind or some sort of action that sets you apart from others. Obstacles could be speaking without considering the ramifications. You know, we could feel limited. So those are kind of contrasting, but Uranus and Mercury, quick moving, swift moving without thinking about the consequences, speaking or actions or patterns or things or habits, things like that possibility. But also Uranus, especially in the square aspect and being in the superior position, has the potential to be the catalyst for feeling like we need to be liberated, right? So we could feel limited, we could feel pinned down or feel like we're under the thumb of some kind. Anxiety showing up around the changing, moving parts. Both of these are mutable signs, Gemini and Virgo. We just talked about the interplay and the change of light and dark there. But Mercury in Virgo, we talked about being a little anxiety inducing. And then Uranus may just be enough to set Mercury and Virgo over the edge, right? Kind of like that. So there could be some anxieties around all the different shifting and all the different changing things because of that stability that we might be looking for in the earth sign of Virgo. Even though they're shifting and changing, it's still looking for security, right? It's an earth sign. Mental breaking points. You know, it's a square. So if there's a lot going on here in the mental sphere and we're not able to sort it all out with that square to Uranus, then that could be difficult too. But really, the possibility to make big shifts, even if they come from difficult moments, is very, very possible here, coming through the middle of the week here. So if we go ahead and move ourselves forward into Thursday, September 4th here, we have our other major aspect of the week. We have Mars squaring Jupiter. And this is an interesting aspect that I've been contemplating and meditating on quite a bit here. So the mental and the emotional sphere, the rational and the connective energies. Contrasting things, right? The mental sphere coming through Mars being in an air sign. The emotional sphere coming through Jupiter being in a water sign. The rational coming through that air sign, a little bit of possibility to detach itself, and then connective tissue of water. Water connects all of us, right? Water is the commonality. Water connects different bodies, right? It's the connective tissue of all of us. Mars represents our actions, our drives, our motivations. These movements are being impressed upon by Jupiter, by the planet of knowledge, wisdom, information, our morals and our ethics, and those higher beliefs and the standards that we hold ourselves to. These are Jupiterian type things. So there's a little bit of a contrast here. It's a square, so there's tensions, but these things are trying to find a way to relate to each other here. I could see it as a broad theme, fairness, levelness, and ease being a theme here, being a factor. Both Libra and Jupiter are concerned with such things. Mars in the sign of Libra is depressed. It's opposite its ruler of Aries. So Mars in the sign of Libra isn't in a great spot, and it struggles. We have Mars, the warrior, in the place of Venus, right? Think of a toddler throwing a tantrum and not being able to console that toddler in a room that's full of glass. It can be very destructive, can be very difficult, right? And then like once things start to spiral out of control, then it can just be difficult, but you're trying to keep the peace. You're trying to like not let the store owner realize that your toddler is throwing a tantrum in the glass room, like kind of like that, right? So there's some diplomacy, there's some appearance of things need to be level, but there's stress, there's aggression, there's Mars that's there, right? So Mars is not in a really easy place. Jupiter, on the other hand, Jupiter is in its place of exaltation in the sign of Cancer. Jupiter can grow and proliferate. It can support. It can care and nurture. It can make a safe space for things to expand from in the sign of Cancer. So we have one planet that's in a really good position, and then we have another planet that's in a little bit of a difficult position here. And that could bring some interesting dynamics along here. Some of the opportunities that I could see coming up here would be diplomatic actions and motivations. Both signs are concerned with care, or at least the appearance of such. Sign of Cancer being the place of the moon, the place of the mother, the place of nurturing, the place of our ancestry and where we've come from. The place where life begins, right? Cancer's on the ascendant of the Thema Mundi, the birth chart of the universe, of the cosmos. So both signs want to be able to work together. However, the planets are a little bit of a different story, and then the aspect at the same time. So the ability to take differences, square, and reconcile them is a possibility here. Finding an understanding, or finding a mental and emotional connection here. It may come through some work. It may come through some tension. There's conflict. We have Mars, right? But there's also Jupiter. There's wisdom. There's grace. I could see these planets agreeing to disagree within a way here. I am wondering, with Mars being in the sign of Libra, where it struggles, where it's trying to assert itself, but it's asserting itself in a place of balance, harmony, and diplomatic social awareness. That doesn't work out so well for Mars. You see why Mars is depressed here in this sign. I'm wondering if there's a way, even if through a difficult moment, that Jupiter in the sign of Cancer is able to guide or inform or help Mars in the sign of Libra in a way. I'm thinking about this if I think of like a mother and child bond. Think of like a teenager who has its own ideas of how it's going to go about doing the things that it wants to do, and then you know, maybe the mother says to it like, oh, you know, I don't know if that's the best route to go, but the teenager thinks that they know the way to go and the right thing to do. So they go do the thing anyways. Maybe it doesn't work out as well as they thought it would do. They come back to the mother and they're like, okay, I'm going to listen. Or a grandmother, or an aunt, or it could be a masculine energy too. It doesn't necessarily have to be feminine, but it's a feminine sign, and it's the place of the moon, which is the, you know, feminine energy. So that's why I go with the motherly energy. So in that story, or in that symbolism, you have Mars in Libra. I'm going to do this my way. My way is gruff. My way is moving forward, right? But Cancer, Jupiter is saying, I don't know if that's the best way to do it in Venus's house. Like, let me show you. I know a little bit about Venus, right? Jupiter and Venus are both the benefics that we have. So maybe Mars doesn't want to listen right away, but maybe Jupiter is able to inform, help, or even check Mars in the sign of Libra if it needs to. Mars in the sign of Libra, since it wants to get its work done, but it's trying to do it in a Venusian way, in a way that at least appears Venus-like or copacetic, right? It can be a little sneaky. It can be a little passive-aggressive. It can also be very diplomatic and very understanding within its actions. But there's an ability to mislead people sometimes with Mars in the sign of Libra on a more shadow side. That doesn't mean that everybody that has Mars in Libra does this necessarily. But Jupiter in Cancer may be a group or a body that is able to, I'm going to go ahead and say check Mars in the sign of Libra. I'm thinking about maybe our actions being limited by our conscience in some way. Kind of like that, right? That can be a good thing or a negative thing. We can put that on the opportunity side or the obstacle side. If our actions are limited by our conscience because we're held to some sort of moral standards that keep us from doing something that maybe we regret later on, or there be some sort of consequences from of some kind, then that's a good thing. That's beneficial for us, right? Like, we have social standards and social norms in most societies that, you know, we conform with in some sort of certain level. However, if our actions are being limited by our conscience because of being worried about what other people think of us, maybe something to do with our upbringing, maybe it has something to do with our ancestry, where we've come from our culture, you know, maybe we are worried about what other people are going to think that are around us, that are in our, you know, little immediate circle, that we care so deeply about the way they think about things and their opinions, then that's not quite so good. That would be much more on the difficult or the obstacle side of this aspect. So I see this weird interplay here this week, this strange connection between an elevated Jupiter that is able to offer its wisdom in abundance, but is the depressed or difficult Mars going to take that? Is it going to learn from Jupiter? Is it going to accept the wisdom? Is it going to accept the grace and the knowledge and the, you know, the higher information that we can get through the sign of Jupiter? Is it going to accept that embracing, nurturing, loving energy that we could have coming through here? That's what I'm wondering. Yeah, so really, really interesting. Some of the other obstacles that could be coming through here are overly optimistic potentials, or overly optimistic of potential outcomes. So Jupiter is abundance, it's positive, it's optimistic, right? So like Jupiter in the sign of Cancer just wants to keep giving, 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 giving. Maybe Mars in Libra doesn't want to accept. So maybe it's overly optimistic about how Mars is going to accept its knowledge and information. You know, maybe Jupiter is kind of lifting itself up a little bit too high in the sign of Cancer. It's possible because it's exalted there. You know, misjudgments of situations, same type of thing. Big feelings and passive aggressive actions. So we have that tantrum happening in the glass room again here. There's big emotions with Jupiter in the sign of Cancer and a water sign that expands things and just feels so deeply here. So yeah, really, really interesting energy here, and wondering how that is going to play out for everybody that we have here. So those are our major aspects that we have for this week, but we're going to go ahead and keep following around here together. So we're going to go right back to our cards here, and we're going to move forward into Friday, September 5th. Moon in the sign of Aquarius. No major aspects going on, opposition from the moon to Venus that day. If we move forward into Saturday, we have Uranus stationing to go retrograde, and in November it's going to move back into the sign of Taurus, and it will move direct in February, and it won't be until I think the end of April where Uranus is going to enter back into the sign of Gemini. So we have what, from November to April, that Uranus is going to be back into the sign of Taurus. So this is another moment to step back, just like with Saturn moving back into the sign of Pisces. These outer planets that have ingressed into a new sign and are moving back, they've given us a glimpse of what's to come, of what their energy is going to be like, and some of the things that they could be giving us. But they are also giving us an invitation to revisit what was done in the previous sign. In the case of Uranus, it's moving back into the sign of Taurus. In the case of Saturn and Neptune, it's going to be moving back into the sign of Pisces. So we're giving this opportunity to integrate these signs together one last time here. As Uranus moves into its retrograde position, wondering about integrating internally what has been enlivened with us, what has sparked motivation. Where have the ideas? What are the possibilities and the tools that have come up? What has come your way here in the last several months? What has been the excitement in life? These are Uranus and Gemini type questions. Has there been enlightenments? Has there been breakthroughs? You know, what has life thrusted you into that maybe you never ever predicted, or it just came way sooner than you thought it would, but maybe it arrived at precisely the exact right time, right? These are things that Uranus in the sign of Gemini prompts me to consider as Uranus moves retrograde and starts to make its way back to the sign of Taurus. It's only going to move to 29 Taurus, so it's going to just make it to that last degree. So it really gives us that feeling of really just finishing things up here as it moves retrograde. So that's what we have going on for this week. We really have some dynamic, interesting things, even though we only have a couple aspects, but we have couple sign changes. So really this is some heightened energy as we are moving right into the eclipse that's going to happen Sunday, September 7th. We will talk about that next week's video. So make sure you come back for that. And invitation to join us at our live meditation Sunday night, 8:30 p.m. Eastern time. If you've made it to the end of this video and you haven't already subscribed, go ahead and hit that subscribe button here on YouTube. Follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and check out the website for all of the things. Thank you for taking this journey through the week with me. I hope everybody has a wonderful day, a wonderful week, and just wonderful things coming your way. I will see you next week for our weekly I'll see you next week here at the video, and I'll see you Sunday night at our meditation. So yeah, take care and have a good week, everybody.